Okay, so welcome back. Welcome back. I don't live in a studio, so it's dark outside and there's no lights. So we can use a microphone. We've got a few things to look at, and I'm going to start with a little video from our fun little state in Victoria about our Vic poll. It's an interesting little video that we're going to just play snippets of and then dissect, just for a little bit of fun. And then we're going to look at a statement, a question that I asked someone, just to put your minds in the mindset that it's a bit bigger than you thought. And then we'll have a look at something else.
Since the end of lockdowns, youth crime in Victoria has surged back to near pre-pandemic levels.
First thing we can note is that it's created by the ABC, the propaganda arm of this executive branch government here in Australia, paid for by government supplement and out of the taxpayer's pocket, so to speak. So that's the first thing to note here, is that this is slightly skewed from a scripted sort of point of view. This is more an advertisement than a news report. And the first thing on the agenda here is a comparison of a before and after a certain event, certain event that has triggered a change. So let's look into what change.
Police expected that, but they didn't expect the worrying change to more violent crime being committed by younger offenders.
Whereas in the past we've seen them, they would have committed a shop theft for their first crime. Sometimes now it's an aggravated burglary.
Here we have Shane acting like it's a normal thing to breed this in society. He's just shocked that it's a little bit more advanced than he expected it to be. I mean, they progress from a little tiny shoplifting to something greater like a car theft or a home invasion. This is sort of expected in a society that we drive sort of manic. And this becomes apparent from Shane's own words as we go through this interview. But here we can see a comparison of a disrespect for society, might have something to do with the poverty and the price of housing, price of food and all the rest of it that's causing people to resort to crime, right? And that might be a reason why crime increases. But is there a disrespect for the state after what Shane did to the people of Victoria? So let's listen a little bit further as we unfold this man's logic.
Carjacking, even home invasions to a lesser degree. That's the concern for us. That's what's different.
Shane Patton says police are searching for what's been driving the change in behaviour, but he believes the pandemic lockdowns probably played a role.
So Shane, the police commissioner of Victoria here in Australia, believes that this is the result of the lockdowns. They contributed to this post-lockdown effect, which is Shane as police commissioner in a military jurisdiction admitting, firstly, that he's lost his command, and then secondly, that he's guilty of some sort of mental health issue that he's inflicted on a population in Victoria.
What does missing, in essence, missing those formative years where you might have been in year 9, 10 or 11, where we know that it's really important where young children can go off the rails, what difference that's made.
Do you suspect that it has played a role in that changing profile of youth crime?
I think it has contributed. What the extent is, we don't really know, but if we look back, prior to the pandemic, we weren't seeing this 0 to 100 offending.
This is Shane as Police Commissioner attempting to pass the buck for a very serious offence that he has in fact committed. Now, if we go to the Criminal Code 1995 and scroll down to section 268.12, crime against humanity, imprisonment or other severe deprivation of physical liberty. 1. A person, the perpetrator, commits an offence if the perpetrator imprisons one or more persons or otherwise severely deprives one or more persons of physical liberty. That's the direct definition of a lockdown. And B, the perpetrator's conduct violates Articles 9, 14 and 15 of the Covenant. And C, the perpetrator's conduct is committed intentionally or knowingly as a part of a widespread or systematic attack directed against a civilian population. Penalty, imprisonment for 17 years. Strict liability applies to paragraph 1B. This would be a covenant that's in place that restricts the actions of the police commissioner while operating in his office. 268.13. Crimes against humanity. Torture. A person, the perpetrator, commits an offence if A, the perpetrator inflicts severe physical or mental pain or suffering upon one or more persons who are in the custody or under the control of the perpetrator. That's the lockdown. And this brought in reservists and RAR. So we're looking at a military jurisdiction which brings a crime against humanity into play. B, the pain or suffering does not arise only from and is not inherent in or incidental to lawful sanctions, and the perpetrator's conduct is committed intentionally or knowingly as a part of a widespread or systematic attack directed against a civilian population. Penalty, imprisonment, 25 years. So this kind of indicates that Shane has committed an offence from his office as a police commissioner. And this is very clear in the criminal code. And then this is why you'll see what comes up in the next visual in this video. It's kind of stark that they know that this scares them, that they have to go on a propaganda game on the ABC again to try and save face when the law is already catching up with them. They are unable to save face against the law when they already committed the offence.
And it may not just be youth crime that's been affected. Even during the pandemic, police warned far-right groups would take advantage of lockdowns to recruit and radicalise new members.
You mean those movements that you attempted to tar and feather with your Terrorism Act, only to have a Supreme Court define that as being the lawful authority here, at which you had technically no rule of law as defined by Justice Lonergan in the words published in her closing remarks in the court case. It's kind of bemusing that then you would try and credit those flags of your Anzac to some sort of right-wing movement that might be something you're all involved in, like the CFMEU. It's kind of ironic that the ones committing the crimes are the ones telling you all that you're doing what they're doing when you're doing nothing. And this is very evident that Shane's completely on the back foot here. trying to defend himself against legislation and codified law in a command that he's obligated to under those Hague and Geneva Conventions. And this is the sad fact of the matter. This is where we point our attention and tell all of you that you cannot sit on your hands anymore. You have to file paperwork and point the finger and make accusations against these United Nations linked officers for the offences that they have committed, going against all the rules that they brought here to operate under. I mean, you must never forget that they tried to tar you with a sovereign citizen brush, locked you all down in your homes, poisoned you all, mandated you all, caused you to lose all of your homes and your jobs and your businesses, and now they're asking for forgiveness after they've committed serious criminal offences to obtain their objectives, and we haven't even looked at who they do this on behalf of.
But Shane Patton also believes the pandemic may have a connection to Victoria's surging road toll.
There just seems to be a general, if you like, a sense of entitlement, this won't happen to me, and a lack of consideration for others.
Shane's brain knows what he wants to speak legally, coming from his military jurisdiction, doing his warfare policing. He's operating in a jurisdiction without rule of law, coming under the Hague Conventions, and therefore speaking about your entitlement to do something that is a right to do, travel your own lands freely under the King's word. It was your highways and byways that weren't to be disturbed by pirates, road pirates, like the police, who enter your private property because they believe they have a right to treat you like wards of the state. It's very clear, because Shane's attitude changes when he's prompted by the ABC, and I wouldn't call this man a journalist, because at the beginning we defined this as scripted, an advertisement. So Shane is being prompted to stay away from this legal clarification that he's your nanny and he's going to invade into your private from his office as a public servant, right? A servant to you, coming into your father's house and defining to you that he's still the nanny after being caught with his hand in the biscuit tin. And this is a clear-cut fact, in that we've pointed out two very serious laws that this man has broken while in his job, making him a criminal at law for doing those very serious and top-level, highest, as we defined in the last video, at law offences.
I think anecdotally people would also tell you people are driving angrier now.
Yeah. No, absolutely agree. We're seeing, and I haven't had the analysis done, but road rage type scenarios where people escalate to violence over what can be very minor disputes.
Police officers in Coffs Harbour have smashed a woman's car window. Have a look at this. They dragged her out of the vehicle after she refused to comply with an officer's request. The woman and her male passenger argued they were not in the officer's jurisdiction and were not driving, but rather travelling in the area.
You guys don't even know what yous are on about.
I need your most senior on duty.
You don't know. You don't have any jurisdiction on this land. Oh, look out!
You're under arrest.
You're a creep.
Yep.
Yeah, man, I would love to just get you one-on-one.
When you correlate, this is what Shane's talking about. Wanting to keep his unlawful ways in existence. As your nanny, he feels like he has a right to enter your private, to treat you like that child after he's committed these offences in his wartime policing under his military jurisdiction, where he is trying to right now separate himself from some sort of command where he is directly involved in that command as the police commissioner, along with Brett Sutton, the health minister at the time, that made these decisions to harm your youth, at which he has spoken about very clearly at the beginning of this video, to have harmed their mental acumen, meaning that they have lost education because of this man across an entire population, an entire Victorian population.
Damning independent review into Australia's response to COVID-19 has found governments and health departments made mistakes. The 97-page report, led by the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet's former Secretary, Peter Shergold, found schools should have remained open and lockdowns and border closures were avoidable. The review also says the nation's most vulnerable communities bore the brunt of the pandemic.
So the media are trying to support this government's position in a defence of its own failures, right? And this can be demonstrated by the second statement that she made in this audio here. Are those vulnerable people the wards of state that Shane is talking about when he wants to enter your vehicles and keep this law thing going where he has a right to nanny you? You can see it in the media as well, that there is this defence going on because they know full well at the core of the law, they have gone so far outside of it that it repeats something that happened in 1946.
Was our social cohesion in Victoria perhaps more fragile after the pandemic years, do you think?
I think everything's more fragile after the pandemic years. To have many people, irrespective of age, felt they had their lives stolen for 2.5 years.
Had their lives stolen for a number of years. This wasn't just a simple little throw you in your house for a day and then come out and all of the cleanup's been done. No, this was years while they took your land titles from underneath your feet in the process. You're starting to see this today. This man has gone outside of the law and is very clearly trying to excuse his command from any repercussions. So we look at some more laws here that relate to what he's done. 268.10, Crime Against Humanity, Enslavement. 1. A person, the perpetrator, commits an offence if A. The perpetrator exercises any or all of the powers attaching to the right of ownership over one or more persons, including the exercise of a power in the course of trafficking, traffic notices, fines, in particular women and children, and the perpetrator's conduct is committed intentionally or knowingly as a part of a widespread or systematic attack directed against a civilian population, like a burden of warfare, in some sort of warfare policing, in some sort of military jurisdiction. So enslavement is this man now saying that he stole, he stole, right? This wasn't just a result of an event. He used the word stole, coming from the police commissioner while on a TV program speaking to the greater population in a legal capacity. 268.20, crime against humanity, persecution. A person, the police commissioner, committed an offence. A. The perpetrator severely deprives one or more persons of any of the rights referred to in paragraph B, and the rights are those guaranteed in Article 6, 7, 8 and 9, Paragraph 2 of Article 14, Article 18, Paragraph 2 of Article 20, Paragraph 2 of Article 23 and Article 27 of the Covenant, and the perpetrator targets the person or persons by reason of the identity of a group or collectivity, or targets the group or collectivity as such, and the grounds on which the targeting is based are political, racial, national, ethnic, cultural, religious, gender, or other grounds that are recognised in paragraph 1 of Article 2 of the Covenant, and the perpetrator's conduct is committed in connection with another act that is a proscribed inhumane act, or genocide, or a war crime, and the perpetrator's conduct is committed intentionally or knowingly as a part of a widespread or systematic attack directed against a civilian population. Now, I'm going to point out that in this video already we have heard something that I'm going to replay now.
And it may not just be youth crime that's been affected. Even during the pandemic, police warned far-right groups would take advantage of lockdowns to recruit and radicalise new members.
Far right. Does that seem like the offence that has just been discussed, in that perpetrating an offence may have occurred? Persecution, right? The grounds on which the targeting is based are political, well, they're right-wing. Racial, they're right-wing. National, they're right-wing. Ethnic, they're cultural. Cultural, they're cultural. Religious, they're the owners of the Constitution under the blessing of Almighty God. Gender or other grounds that are recognised in paragraph 1 of Article 2 of the Covenant. Does that sound like the media is partaking in an advertisement along with the police commissioner excusing themselves from persecuting Australians? So let's have a look at something else in relation to a flag here, because they're desecrating the flag of Anzac for a reason. That the police commissioner and the ABC are in cahoots here, desecrating the very flag that Anzac flew as light horsemen into battle. So it's a desecration of a war memorial in a sense, but we look at 268.42, war crime. Improper use of a flag, insignia, or uniform of the adverse party. A person, the perpetrator, commits an offence if the perpetrator uses a flag, insignia, or uniform of the adverse party. We've just seen Shane and the ABC use that flag twice. The perpetrator uses the flag, insignia, or uniform while engaged in an attack, well, it's a media attack, trying to defend their position after they committed crimes within the criminal code, or in order to shield, favour, protect, or impede military operations, peacekeeping, peacetime, the perpetrator knows of or is reckless as to the illegal nature of such use of the flag, insignia, or uniform. They are very clearly aware, given that Matthew Reason of Fixated Persons involved every state police force when attacking the war memorials back in July 2020, leading to the words from Justice Lonergan in relation to a Kingdom of Australia and this red ensign, or this red federal standard. the perpetrator knows of or is reckless as to. So he doesn't have to do this on purpose. He's doing it in a reckless capacity. No, he's not. They are doing this in a propaganda sense on the media by sitting down and scripting an advertised segment on the TV. The perpetrator's conduct results in death or serious personal injury. Well, we saw a melee turn out from Shane's involvement in the Victoria markets and then his use of military weapons on the Shrine of Remembrance in the King's Domain in Melbourne. A direct line connecting this flag to a lineage by ancestry, bringing these very rules into play in a right of self-determination against what is a United Nations government and administration at which he is obligated to these rules.
Last week, the state government toughened youth justice laws after a series of cases where young offenders, even those alleged to have killed innocent members of the public, were granted bail.
I think we'll see offenders who should be remanded at a greater rate, which I think will provide a level of community safety.
But Shane Patton says changing the culture of youth offending won't be easy.
Outside of the fact that he's blaming it on your failure to parent your children and his need to step in as that little nanny government that's going to come and look after everything, did you catch the problem at hand? It went by very quickly, but did you catch the problem at hand coming from the police commissioner's mouth himself? And if you add everything up together that has been discussed, it should be very evident, but we're not going to mention it here. You can add 2 and 2 together.
This more violent profile of offending that we're seeing with child offenders and that cultural change, do you think that's a passing phase?
I wish it was a passing phase, but it's been with us for a little while now, and
that cultural change, do you think that's a passing phase?
Some of who look younger than 10 years old, damaged more than 60 cars, smashed hundreds of windows and attacked at least 8 businesses in the small central Australian town.
And that cultural change, do you think that's a passing phase?
You don't turn these trends around overnight.
Ben Knight, ABC News.
Nice little scripted propaganda piece there from the ABC as we continue to look at the actual criminal offence they're trying to cover up. 268.25, war crime, torture. A person, the police commissioner, committed an offence when the police commissioner inflicted severe physical or mental pain or suffering or upon one or more persons. And B, the perpetrator, the police commissioner, inflicted the pain or suffering for the purposes of punishment, intimidation, or coercion, or a reason based on discrimination of any kind. I stole their livelihoods. I stole their futures. I tortured their children. I took their children's education away from them. I dumbed down a population with the help of my health minister and with the help of some sort of command above me. Isn't that right, Shane? The perpetrator knew of and wasn't reckless because he knew of and purposely went through this act. As to the factual circumstances that establish that the person or persons are so protected, or were under the Geneva Conventions, because we had that flag displayed on the media while this police commissioner was excusing himself from the crimes being pointed out by the people under that flag, so recognised by the Supreme Court of New South Wales. So how do we add all of this up together, Shane? Let's have a look at something else quickly.
The The United Nations decided they can't be bothered with China and Iran and Venezuela
North Korea.
North Korea. Why bother with that? Let's go to Queanbeyan and check out the torture cells that are occurring. Queanbeyan. So the United Nations rocked up to Queanbeyan, and the Queanbeyan jail said, no thanks.
Yeah, well,
you're not in. You haven't made an appointment. You're not in.
So what happens is, because Australia is a party to this Commission on the Prevention of Torture or something like that, you know, they sent these inspectors around to rock up unannounced. Well, the Perrottet government said, no, you're not coming into our jails just unannounced, because...
Now, while we didn't get everything right, I believe we got more right than wrong. And without dwelling on every decision we got wrong, I believe it's important to point out one mistake which was made by governments here and around the world, and that was the strict enforcement of vaccine mandates. Health officials and governments were acting with the right intentions to stop the spread. But if the impact of vaccines on transmission was limited at best, as is now mostly accepted...
No, you're not coming into our jails just unannounced, because you know that with all of these sorts of things, we know historically that Australia always cops it from the UN. You know, there was a great report that UN Watch out of Geneva just did about Michelle Bachelet, the outgoing human rights commissioner, and you know, she criticized personally North Korea as many times as she criticized Australia.
Interesting kind of defence there from Zionist media Sky News. But you can see how they try and excuse the government from committing offences that it's obligated to adhere to all of these rules, right? So we're supposed to follow these rules that are set down by these people, but they don't follow them themselves. They use propaganda to try and weasel their way out of the rules that they're obligated to play under. But did you catch it? Did you catch it? Let's play it again.
Why bother with that? Let's go to Queanbeyan and check out the torture cells that are occurring. Queanbeyan. So
the United Nations turning up in Australia for the purposes of torture, Shane. Torture. When it's been pointed out very clearly time and time again that this is the act that you committed, along with the other states that lock down borders that don't exist because they were repealed in the Constitution Act at Clause 8, if I remember correctly. So to the United Nations inspectors that did attempt to turn up, is poisoning someone with some sort of medication and sending them off to some sort of unit called forensic mental health and numbing their mind for believing in something that doesn't agree with the state but has actually been proven to be truthful at law, is that a war crime? Would that constitute revisiting the jail system in New South Wales to scrutinise those criminal offences called torture? Would that constitute you having to interview people that were tortured by the state of New South Wales? And would this media propaganda machine be liable to any offence for trying to defend a position that committed that offence? Just questions. They're just questions. Some people will harp on that this is a continued complaint, but they don't understand what a long game is, where you have very, very large amount of evidences over years that could be correlated together to formulate some sort of accusation that might see these people liable to some sort of rule set that they're unaware of or completely aware of and reckless too.
Premier, protesters are out again today and they plan to be out again tomorrow.
Go home.
How frustrating is it when you see the numbers this low?
Go home and follow the rules. That's a very simple message. Go home and follow the rules. There is no need to protest about anything, for or against. It's not safe. It just doesn't make any sense. You are potentially putting this strategy at risk. No one.
So, little children, go home and follow the rules. He didn't say the law. He said the rules while we perform our experiment. And did you catch the other word that was spoken there? You are potentially putting this strategy at risk. Strategy at risk. Plan. Pre-planned. Pre-planned by a bunch of cronies that sought to take away your rights. Take away your rights while you were in a state of slumber or wokeness as to asserting your rights. Now, I know a lot of people listening get some sort of grandiose ideas out of what they've been shown. It's your towns that are being affected by all of this. And inside your towns, you have elders that are in places like the Chamber of Commerce, the CWA, and the RSL. Now, I'd like you to listen to something that I asked a question of a soldier, a veteran, and I'd like you to listen to his answer so that you can correlate your own place, because there are things that you wouldn't speak automatically that most of them would comprehend instantly just hearing it. So I'm just going to play a little audio and then we'll come back afterwards. Oi, Pioneer.
Yes.
I'm recording. Can you answer a question for me?
Sure I can.
What's your duty?
My duty? My duty is duty first. To seek out and close with the enemy, to kill or capture in the season hold ground, to repel attack by day or night, regardless of season, weather or terrain.
That's what I expected, thank you. A man who knows his duty believed in something only to discover that it wasn't quite the truth. And he had been missing something only to be given it to make him whole. To make him whole. So let's just have a listen here to another politician.
Today is Anzac Day, our national day of commemoration. Every year on this day, the anniversary of the landing at Gallipoli, we come together to show our respect for those military personnel whose service keeps our country safe. And we honour the memory of the more than 103,000 Australians who have given their life in our country's name. When we think about the Gallipoli campaign, we think about mateship and sacrifice, the heart of the Australian character. We think about determination, but we also think about futility. We think about courage and tragedy.
We think about lineage, ancestry, culture, a birthright, the naked ownership of a constitution through a Constitution Act in some sort of line of authority, giving something the ability to hold rule of law. And this is very scriptural in its nature, which is why you see all of these biblical things surrounding what your Anzac represent in all their war memorials and in the layouts of your cities and towns. They are the remnants of your forefathers left for you that this government has been dividing up and taking away from you while parading around that it supports you and your rights. This can be easily demonstrated by the actions of the naval forces in respect to not migration, but innocent and real refugees that get treated like prisoners before they are given a right of asylum.
This is my warning to anyone considering a similar journey. I know your game, and you do not have a chance of winning. If you attempt to come here by boat, you will never settle in Australia.
So one could question this always was, always will be, just by the words of this naval officer. But we see that there is this closing fence line around the country in relation to international borders and the not wanting people to come here. But at the same time, there has been a lot of hoo-ha in the media in relation to something else. Let's just have a listen to Pauline.
So they've done the damage. We can't cope with it. This is going to go on for years and years. They've put $10 billion into a housing fund, which means the monies that they get in investment will actually build housing. They've admitted they can't do it. They've lied to the Australian people. These people out there who don't follow politics and then hear this announcement think, oh, wonderful, good on Labor. They have done so much damage in this country. I hope people realise this. And, you know, you've got to demand answers from your politicians, from the leaders of the political parties. What are you going to do about it? Don't just give us lip anymore. People want answers how you are going to deal with this.
The unfortunate problem here, Pauline, is that you're selling them to complain at their politicians like little children when you have actually gone far and wide outside of the limitations of the laws that you're supposed to act in. They're called war crimes. They're called administrative fraud. They're called crimes against humanity. They are some of the most heinous crimes that have been committed throughout all of history. They were brought up multiple times in our own history as Australia, Pauline. So having been signatory to these rules that forbid you from doing certain things that many of you in that government and parliament have done, then why would we ask you what you're going to do about fixing it when you're the culpable party that screwed it all up in the first place on purpose under an administration administering the people out of everything they own? And when we look at a serving soldier having almost lost life and limb in his duties, then one would question why you would put that at risk, why you would put that exact notion of defending something loyally at its core at risk.
With the threats that are currently out there in the world today, and from someone who has served in our Defence Forces, do you think that's enough?
I have to be honest with you, the biggest threat right now in our Defence Forces is our leadership that cannot hold on, that cannot retain their own members, and nobody is signing up. That is our biggest threat to this country today.
And when you speak of the Prime Minister's office lying, that's a very strong term to come from a senator that is technically not allowed to use the word liar on the Senate floor, but is here using it in the media very strongly, while I point out the fraud and corruption going on in the Office of Prime Minister, along with the Federal Executive Council.
10,000 Australians. May everyone get off the grass, please? Sure. Let's just move back for a minute.
That puts disgrace to this veteran's duties that he spoke in defence of you, politicians, divvying up land titles, importing much more in the citizenry, while holding no technical rule of law, while speaking about the Anzac that you go about desecrating on a daily basis. And this is all now technically founded at law, because the actions of a Supreme Court justice defining a right with God saw all of you scramble to the point where a police commissioner of Victoria and a Premier of New South Wales, Persecute, have both spoken very loudly on the media, backtracking from their position of leadership in the times that those crimes were committed. Leadership, Pauline. So this begins to kind of turn around full circle in that, are we actually defending the Commonwealth of Australia, or are we welcoming new owners in and calling it governing someone else's country? These are real questions of you as a senator for Queensland, Pauline, being one of your constituents, would want an answer from you as to why you would undermine the blessing of Almighty God in the lineage of those Anzac to then come along and govern and welcome to country something that is alien to the Constitution without giving them their own sovereignty that they had before 1967. So we come full circle here in that we demonstrate a knowledge here and some links to things that a lot of people are not aware of, would not be able to speak up for and pretend to be able to act in this capacity without any trail of evidence or history to prove what they speak or their actions. And that's where we come to speaking directly to a government about its crimes while naming the offenders that have committed those crimes in a manner that demonstrates the crime that they have indeed committed. So we're not attacking people willy-nilly here, in that it is demonstrated very, very clearly that certain perpetrators have committed certain offences that they are now on the media trying to excuse themselves from.
Well, revelations this morning that more men and women are leaving the ADF than joining, potentially leaving Australia vulnerable. Joining us live now is the Independent Senator Jackie Lambie. Jackie, I remember Peter Dutton announced a plan a while back when he was Minister to jack up troop numbers. There was criticism at the time because the incentives to join just weren't there. I remember talking to you about it. So why isn't that being remedied? Why isn't that happening?
Because your incentive that they're giving them, this is their first mistake. They're offering $50,000 for those who have done their 4 years to stay in. What they didn't incentivise is anything for those that are senior corporals and sergeants within the military to keep them in, because we need them for mentoring. So guess what? This is what's happened out of the 2,000 people that they've asked. They've had about 800 that have taken up on that 50 grand, and you've had about 1,200 that have said, no, thank you, I won't be around in 3 years' time. So that's your first problem, is first of all, you've given a kick in the backside to the people, the backbone of the military, which are your senior corporals and your sergeants, and offered them nothing to stay in and mentor. And I think your other problem is we've seen what senior commanders do with their troops. I mean, that's why we're at a Royal Commission. They throw them under the bus. So you've got two distinctive problems there. First of all, you're not offering those people who should be offered money and incentives to stay. You've offered them nothing on the table. And secondly, we have seen through the war crimes, the Royal Commission, that senior command will not take any responsibility for their own actions or lack of. And that is a massive problem, and that is what you're seeing play out there in Australia. And you've got people out there saying, just don't join until it's fixed.
We can see how the executive branch of government has tried to undermine everything that is royal in this game. We can see that through the Office of the Governor-General taking party to Noel Pearson and the wokeism that is an unattainable foundation in international law without all of your DEI investors. Now, when we look at the chiefs of the military, we need to look at David McBride and the Brereton Report and the fact that these chiefs excused themselves, and we will see hid the ability for the command into the Parliament to be connected so that they could be excused from defining who gave the orders to them to do these crimes. And this is very evident when we could look a lot more through the media record and demonstrate that certain appointments were made into this command to take command over certain aspects of which Shane, the Police Commissioner of Victoria, as well as Persecute, Premier of New South Wales, are both backtracking from very quickly, given that it is, in fact, an offence in their position, given that certain flag was put down and consecrated to God before all those war memorials in all those capital cities and 50 towns across the country, and ignored by a government that had an obligation to a naked owner to a constitution, while it tried to remove that naked owner from that constitution and hand it to an alien party without giving that party its true sovereignty back. This is very manipulating in that money partners are playing people who can't define their gods very clearly. And when God comes in with a clear line of authority to hold that constitution and demonstrates that administrators have committed heinous international offences and administrative fraud, they no longer have a right to that line of authority in that administration. They are committing acts of war called war crimes. Let's have a look at Angus Campbell here, covering up for the government.
Tempers flared, proceedings broke down when Angus Campbell said withholding information from the public was done to avoid harming international relations.
Can't we handle the truth?
It kind of sounds like a movie, Senator.
It is a movie, and we're living it, Colonel Jessup.
You want answers! I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
Senator Conroy then took it even further, alleging Angus Campbell's trying to protect the government.
That's called a political cover-up.
Senator, I feel I've explained the basis of
That's a political cover-up.
decisions.
You're engaged in a political cover-up.
I take extreme offence at that statement you've made.
It's far, far worse than a political cover-up. It's military policing, wartime policing in a military jurisdiction wherein orders were given and command was followed and a Yamashita protocol applies along with a Nuremberg offence. So following or issuing is non-consequential. You committed the offence and now it's being pointed out to you, and opening up that line of command would demonstrate that that command comes from over the seas, as the Bible said, afar, far away, not of this land, not the holy ground so defined by those Anzac. If it was to be found out by the Australian people that the federal executive branches of government were an imposter that didn't have a right to rule of law in a line of authority scripturally, that there would be some sort of mayhem on the streets that might involve Shane's men smashing windows and accusing those rightful owners of being sovereign citizens. And the reality is this, that this world around you is fracturing, and people spoke of the before COVID and after COVID moment where you would awaken from your debt slavery and see the people that imposed these horrible conditions upon you that you were totally unaware of while you were in your slumber. So I think I'll leave it there for now. It's pretty evident that this country has been screwed over royally. It's pretty evident that royal men are concerned about their lineage in the defence and the loss of their lives for and in this country. To go and totally disrespect that, Anthony Albanese, as was discussed in previous audio, is an act of treason, is an act of treason. If it were to be found out that a foreign line of authority does exist, as confirmed on the Supreme Court of New South Wales, then it would be a war crime. A war crime. So I'll leave everybody to think about all of these things, as it's demonstrated that you might be ignorant of so many things.
Premier, protesters are out again today and they plan to be out again tomorrow.
Go home.
How frustrating is it when you see the numbers this low?
Go home and follow the rules.